Good morning, everyone. Not only is today Cinco de Mayo, but it's also the Kentucky Derby, which is the biggest single day of betting race in this country. And before deciding to pick what horse, I think you have to use some form of statistics as a guide. And I'm not saying that statistics like analytics, like as a Bible, but using statistics as something to use as what horses do you want to select for the Derby in terms of your win bet and your exotic bets. And with that, here's some statistics I think you should know in terms of before you're making the Kentucky Derby bet. Since 2011, the last horses who've won the Kentucky Derby have won their last races, and I think that's due to part is in the past before 2011 there used to be a points oh no a earnings based status where you have to win as horses to earn as much money as they can. The top 20 horses in terms of a cutoff to win, to enter the Derby, and that's why you had big long shots like Giacomo and Mind That Bird. And but since 2011, the last horses who won the Derby have won their last race. So I think that has to do with the point system now. That's just my feeling, and I think you're getting better quality horses instead of having those big major long shots. So that's been since 2011. So take that as a sort of a consideration. Another statistics is the curse of the Apollo. So what the Apollo curse is that since 1882, no horse who has not run as a 2-year-old has ever won the Kentucky Derby, which case the last time was Apollo. And there's several reasons for that, but I do think conditioning makes a huge part of it. And also I think if you're trying to cram everything into a prep race for the Derby, you might not have the horse might not have a solid foundation. And with the Apollo curse, there's actually two horses, and they're considered strong contenders for the race. One is Justify, who's the morning line favorite, and Magnum Moon. Justify has won 3 of all of his starts, and he's won all 3 races this year. And Magnum Moon has won 4 starts this year. With the 3-star horses who've actually ran the Derby, the most recent winner was Big Brown, who won the Kentucky Derby, but he had raced as a 2-year-old. The other horses who made 3 starts prior to the Derby as a 3-year-old was Indian Charlie in 1998 and Curlin in 2007, and both times they finished third. They were both undefeated prior to the Derby. They only ran 3 times overall prior to the Derby, but they finished third. So that's another consideration to think of if you're thinking about Justify as a horse. With regards to Magnum Moon, he already has won 4 races, so this Derby will be his 5th start. And I did some research, and one prominent horse who won his Derby as a 5th start was Fusaichi Pegasus in I believe it was in 1999. It was actually in 2000. My fault. But yeah, that's like I said, that's just used as a guide to statistics. Also, the buyer speed figures. You have 3 horses who have won who have 100 in terms of buyer speed figures. You have Good Magic, Bolt Dior, Justify, and Mendelssohn. And I started off with saying that since 2011 there was all the Derby winners have won their last race. There are 8 horses in this field who won their last race: Audible, Good Magic, Justify, My Boy Jack, Mendelssohn, Magnum Moon, Vino Riso, and Noble Indy. So maybe take that into consideration in terms of what are those horses when you make your choices. In terms of betting big races like the Kentucky Derby, for me personally, and this is just my preference, I like to look at the pedigree side of it. And one example is like Vino Rosso, his second dam, Flaming Heart, was a dam of a commissioner who was my Derby bet, my Derby horse in 2014. However, he never made it to the Kentucky Derby, but he ran second in the Belmont. So that's one aspect in terms of a pedigree. The other one is you have Audible and Mendelssohn. I call it the nephew and uncle connection. And the reason is Audible sire into mischief is a half brother to Mendelssohn. So that's the nephew and uncle connection. Think of it, let's say, like War Admiral and Seabiscuit. Those were the nephew uncle connection because they had Man of War in their pedigree. Another aspect for the pedigrees is there are $3 million horses. What I mean is there are 3 horses who were sold for over $1 million in public auction. You had Good Magic, who was $1 million yearling, sold. Same thing with Mendelssohn. And Install Regard was actually a $1 million 2-year-old that was sold in public auction. With respects to the pedigree, and in addition to the 8 horses that have won their last races, I think this is a lot of experts are saying this is one of the toughest fields or deepest fields they've ever seen in terms of quality for this race, and I agree to their testament. So it can cause a headache because there's so many horses, but with a lot of quality horses, I think it's going to be a great betting race today. And with that, before I select my horse to win, I have to look at certain things about the exotics. My bet for the exotics, I plan to do, which is called a $1 million exacta box and trifecta box. So I'm doing it for 3 horses: Good Magic, Mendelssohn, and Installed Regard. So since I mentioned those were the 3 horses that were sold in public auction, those are the horses for $1 million. Those are the horses that I plan to use as my exotics. So that's my $1 million exacta box and trifecta box. The one concern I do have about Mendelssohn is in terms of shipping. He just came to Louisville Thursday, so in terms of like quarantine. So and I know a lot of Europeans haven't done well, or those who've won the UAE Derby in Dubai. However, with Mendelssohn being a half brother of champion race mare Beholder and Grade 1 winner and sire into Mischief, he has a great foundation. In addition, he did win the Breeders' Cup Turf when he shipped in last fall at Del Mar. So, but if you have some concerns about Mendelssohn, another possibility for an exotic bet for a trifecta box could be Good Magic, Vino Riso, and Justify. So that could be a good quality trifecta box. The actual horse I'm going to bet to win, and I'm going to call across the board win, place, and show, is Good Magic. Last fall in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, I bet across the board on Good Magic, and he was a maiden at that time, and so he hadn't won any race. However, the last 2 races he finished second. He had run 3 races prior to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but never won a race. And I put him across the board bet, win, place, and show on the Breeders' Cup Juvenile because he was $1 million yearling and he finished second in both races. And when he won, I was elated. But when he won, I won the win, the place, and show wagering. So that's what I plan to do. His morning line odds was 12-1, but this morning I checked, and right now currently he's 8-1. But still, at 8-1, if you do across the board, I think that's the great value bet. And last year is the first time I really used across the board when it comes to betting on big races, because instead of putting a win bet on a horse, you have let's say like a safety net, because the horse finish. If you do across the board and the horse finish 1, 2, 3, you get a portion of the prize money. In terms of the betting, think of it, let's say when you play craps, when a point is established, you could lay the odds. That's sort of what a across the board bet is. So that's my horse for the Derby to win is Good Magic. The other horse you might consider in terms of not winning or even place is probably Justify as a show bet. As I mentioned, there were there were two other horses who ran 3 races who were undefeated prior to the Kentucky Derby, Indian Charlie and Curlin. However, both of them finished third. So if you want to do a show bet on Justify, that could be a good value bet. Well, I don't know because he's the favorite. But if you want to get pieces of the prize, you could put Justify on your show bet. Given the fact that he's currently the 72, you might not get a lot. But if you want, let's say, to win some money, that could be a good, a small wager to think about. Well, I know I'm not trying to be exhausted. I try to put in as much information as I can in terms of this bet, the Kentucky Derby, and I hope everybody who bets the Derby does well today. So wherever you make the bet, wherever you go to a racetrack, I'm going to actually Golden Gate Fields in near Berkeley. And off a side note, as like I said, Vino Rosso about his pedigree. Well, also in his pedigree in the female side, I believe the dam of Flaming Heart in Vino Rosso ran at Bay Meadows. So there's a little historical point side bet if you think about in terms of historical aspect to it, I should say, not side bet, but historical aspect to that horse in Vino Rosso and the Bay Meadows connection. So yeah, so good luck for everybody who, if you go to the racetrack, and maybe, like I said, since not only today is Cinco de Mayo but the Kentucky Derby, if you go to the racetrack, get some tequila and some mint julep.